Great. We are honored to be here today as part of the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits Coffee Chat. We have been asked to talk a little bit about advocacy, which those of you who know us at New Futures, that's the world we live in all the time. So we are honored to be here today and talk about how nonprofits can be involved in advocating for change.
Kate, since I'm advancing the slides, if you could just let me know when you want me to advance.
Go right ahead. And obviously, I am Kate Frey, I'm the Vice President of Advocacy. I'm joined with Peter today. I've always been advised not to try to say his last name. I will let him do it, but he's our incredible training manager. So he will be able to get us through a lot of this and answer a lot of questions. So very quickly, who we are. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization based out of Concord, New Hampshire. But we work to improve the health and wellness of all Granite Staters through public policy change and civic empowerment. I won't spend a lot of time about our model, but let's just say what we do is we have a lot of folks, some folks on staff who are policy experts who work on direct legislation at the State House. And then we have a great community engagement team that works along with our communication staff to really educate the public about important bills and policy issues that are going on at the State House. Next slide. So Peter, I'm going to have you kind of go over this slide. I think this was where you added in, and then I'll go back on the advocacy piece.
Sure. So it's important to remember when we are talking about advocacy that our state legislators are effectively volunteers in New Hampshire. We do technically pay them, but it is only $100 a year. So this is not their primary job and it's not their primary source of income. They also don't have legal research staff helping them parse all of the bills that are proposed every year. This past session, there were over 1,000 bills proposed, and there's no way without any help they can read all of those bills and fully understand the impacts of them. So they really rely on constituents to let them know what's going on in the community and educate them about the ins and outs of those really advanced topics as they come up. And as you may know, New Hampshire has the third largest English-speaking legislative body in the world with 424 members. That breaks out to one representative per 3,000 something residents, which means that our legislators are also uniquely accessible in New Hampshire. So don't be afraid to leverage your personal and professional experience with these people as they try to navigate the very muddy waters of all of the different policy areas they will interact with as legislators. Next slide.
Great. So I'll take it from here. And so what Peter said is absolutely so true, that it's really more important than ever for nonprofits and the public in general to weigh in. There's so many things that are going on at the federal, at the state level. And as Peter said, at our state level, we really have the opportunity, unique opportunity in New Hampshire to reach out to legislators very easily because there are so many of them. So just quickly why it's important for nonprofits to advocate. Obviously as a state, we rely on nonprofits to deliver human services, social services that are mandated by state and federal law. Many of them, some nonprofits carry out the state work. It's a huge part of our industry here in New Hampshire. We make up 15% of New Hampshire's total gross profits. Nonprofits can uniquely speak for the needs of New Hampshire residents, especially our most vulnerable, who may not be able to speak for themselves. And they are really a trusted ally for those they serve. They can empower constituents to share their stories. And I will say they're a very important voice at the legislature. I've heard many legislators talk about their local nonprofits and what the impact certain bills may be to them. So it's very, very important that nonprofits advocate. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Sorry about that. So there are a lot of myths about what nonprofits can do and not do. And I just want to break that down a little bit, but I also want folks to understand that We offer like an hour and a half training that really gets into the weeds of advocacy versus lobbying, which I think is the major concern around nonprofit organizations about what they can and cannot do. But I want to just say, first and foremost, thank you, nonprofits can advocate. Advocacy is educating legislators and other covered officials about your work and what your field and organization does. So education advocacy is a huge piece of the bubble and doesn't even touch lobbying. And at every opportunity, nonprofits have an important role to educate not only on the work they do, but what certain impacts of policy changes can impact that work. Nonprofits can even lobby. And that's another myth we hear about. There's concerns maybe at the IRS level or at federal funding, state funding. But you really can lobby as an organization. You have to stay under 5% of your annual budget. You can get that up to 20% if you fill out a form under the IRS rules. And even with federal and state legislation, there's a lot of wiggle room. So nonprofits can lobby. But lobbying is really different in some ways from advocacy because it's that direct ask. That's really when you're saying to the public, we want you to vote on SB 123 because it's important to New Hampshire nonprofits call these senators on this committee. That's a direct ask and that falls under lobbying. There's also grassroots lobbying. That's when you're asking your constituents to make calls to certain legislators. Both of those are considered lobbying. Again, it can be done, but you just have to make sure you do it within that you're keeping that work separate. You're doing timekeeping. We have a whole training on this, so we will get into that if you ever want us to do that at another point. What nonprofits can't do is participate in political intervention. So that means political campaigns, endorsing or opposing any candidate for office. That's really something because of 501c3 status, nonprofits cannot do, but they can absolutely do kind of voter registration drives, including voter engagement, as long as it's, just completely voter engagement, publicize election day when it's coming, where to register, registration deadlines, things like that. So that's a little bit about what they can and cannot do. Next slide, please. So again, advocacy, lobbying is just one type of advocacy activity. Peter will get into a little bit about all the other types of advocacy that can be done, and really advocacy, again, is education. And so you have a wide berth to really educate about what your nonprofit does and the impacts to certain policies. We always say, check with your organization first. If you're an employee or you're not quite sure what your role is on a certain issue, then you can always advocate off the clock. You can use your email, you can use your own phone, things like that. Again, I talked about lobbying being the direct ask. So again, if you're nervous about lobbying, then you can always advocate by educating. And again, 501c3 organizations can lobby if it constitutes 5% of the budget or less. And there's a little wiggle room there to go up to 20%. And if you're interested, please look into our nonprofit lobbying versus advocacy. Next slide. So we get this question a lot with what can nonprofit staff and board members do? And it's really important to remember that we all have like individual capacity. So nonprofit organizations may be prohibited from things like supporting or opposing candidates for public office. This, however, does not apply to activities of board members when they're acting in their individual capacity. Even though board members are required to follow the bylaws and things like that as representing their organization, but in their individual capacity, they can certainly speak any way they see fit about a candidate or about an issue. The same thing for staff. You don't give up the right or privilege to vote or fully engage in the political process just because you work at a nonprofit. So if you want to get engaged in an issue or an issue that even your organization feels strongly about, but they might not want you to be a public face to it, You can always do it on your own time with your own resources. You can have that conversation with your legislator or with your employer as well, saying, this is what I would like to do. How do you feel about it? I completely understand if I need to just do this on my own time. So we do a lot of times encourage folks to speak to the management team or your boss to make sure you're not crossing the line. We have a lot of people who say, well, I'm Joe Schmo from Lee, New Hampshire. I want to speak to this issue, but I work at this organization. Can I say I'm there? I work there. Should I not say it? And so what we tell folks to do is when you're there in individual capacity, introduce yourself, where you're from, and say that you're speaking on your own behalf. Although you may work at ABC nonprofit, there may be an importance to that. You want to separate that out and say, I'm not speaking on their behalf today, but I do work at this organization. I'm speaking on my own behalf. So really set aside a separation if there's concern about speaking on behalf of the other organization. And also just please remember, advocacy equals education. There is nothing to keep staff or board members from providing education about what the organization does. And at all these trainings, we say the most effective advocacy for every individual is to vote, vote, vote. So that's a quick summary of what staff and board members can do. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to hand this back over to Peter.
So obviously, when we talk about advocacy, the first thing that comes to mind is coming all the way down to Concord to the State House and speaking at a committee hearing or speaking directly with legislators during the process. But there's so many other ways to advocate that can be done remotely or for longer periods of time, or even completely outside of the legislative session or interacting with the process directly. You can always reach out to officials outside of business hours representing yourself. We will very often do call and email campaigns to specific officials on specific bills. You can also do something like write a letter to the editor or write an op-ed. This is something that I do very frequently with advocates as part of my job. I would love to help draft one of these with you. And in the past, we have helped submit op-eds to local papers with multiple organizations signing on to them in support. You can, leverage how accessible our legislators are by reaching out to them directly and scheduling maybe a one-on-one meeting over coffee to talk about the issues you're seeing in the community. You can also try to schedule in-person meetings with a group or an organization. Taking that one step further, there are very often legislative events, often legislative breakfasts happening in the community that are worth attending. In an official capacity, not in an official capacity. Either way, it is a great way to interact with legislators without having the pressure of a committee hearing on top of you. Building that relationship is going to give you extra showing power when you do have a specific ask with these legislators. So all of these are great ways to raise awareness of issues, but also great ways to raise awareness of your organization and what you're doing for the community, so that when issues do come up, legislators trust you as an expert in the field. And of course, there is, coming down to Concord, participating in a public hearing, written and oral testimony. Those are both things we will happily help you draft and navigate. But all of these methods of advocacy are just methods of delivering your experience and your story. And as far as which method you should use at what time, aside from strategized campaigns, it's important to just lean in where your strengths are. If you're a good writer, do that. If you're a good orator and you're quick on your feet answering questions, do that. There are always ways to plug in whatever capacity we have, and it's just important to utilize that capacity in the most effective, targeted way. Next slide, please. So these are two examples from our recent history that I like to bring up as creative outlets for advocacy. This picture on the left is a picture from a few years ago. There was a vote on retaining Medicaid expansion. There was a giant snowstorm on the day of that hearing, and we could not ask advocates to come down and testify in the dangerous weather. So some of our coworkers that lived in Concord went out to the front of the State House and built snowmen to hold signs, kind of like a snowman rally. There were not many advocates that day due to the weather, so this was the first thing legislators saw as they were walking into the State House, and it really stuck in their mind as they were attending these hearings and having these debates. That is one great way to raise awareness. This was picked up by local and I think national news. This picture on the right, very similarly, this is a budget hearing where we were advocating for funding for child care centers across the state. We sent over 1,000 coloring pages to child care centers all across the state. Kids colored them in, sent them back to us, and then we had children come and deliver them to the committee during the hearing. If you can see in that picture, they're smiling. That does not often happen in finance hearings. So that was a really effective way to bring the story to their attention and raise awareness about an issue in a setting that is usually pretty stuffy. Having a bunch of kids come marching down the aisle really stuck with them. Next slide, please. I bring those two stories up not to tell you to build snowmen every time there's a vote, but to emphasize how important it is to humanize data and policy with stories. Stories are proven to be more effective than just data. And that's not to say data is not important, but it's very important that we humanize that data with real lived experiences, because everybody has access to data. We can always parse data, and there are in fact many lobbyists relaying data to the committees in a pretty consistent way. What's important is making that data stick and grounding it in the real world with those real human stories. So those are the things that we look to advocates for, because you're an expert in your own personal and professional experience. And you can really characterize that data in a way that nobody else can. So it's very important to leverage those stories when you have them, and kind of amplify that story as a means of making the data stick. Next slide, please. So if any of that is appealing to you, we have a training program at New Futures that travels all across the state. It's completely free. It's also very customizable. As Kate mentioned, we do a training specifically on lobbying versus advocacy. We also have entry-level advocacy trainings about the process and where to get involved. If you would like to get involved but don't know where to start, absolutely reach out to us on our website. You can fill out a form to sign up for trainings, and you'll meet with probably me to figure out what we can do for your organization and how to help. Next slide. And I think this is the last slide. If you want to stay plugged into what's going on at the State House, we do send out action alerts about all of our legislative priorities. We'll only send you emails about what you sign up for to let you stay plugged in with all of the thousands of bills that are proposed over the years. We'll let you know what's going on with the ones you care about, so you can just focus on plugging in when it matters.
Peter, real quickly, can you go back to the slide with the other, or Karen, with all the ways to advocate? I wanted to just point out a couple things to folks. We get a question a lot about what is the most effective way to reach legislators, and I completely agree with Peter that you need to really lean into what you're comfortable with. But there are a few things I will say. It is shocking how many legislators tell us that they don't get a lot of phone calls. And when they do get phone calls, they really pay attention. And I say that, it's never very comfortable to call somebody directly and have a conversation, but there is a way to do that. So you feel comfortable planning ahead what you're going to say, even leaving a message. But we often hear from legislators, they really pay attention with phone calls. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do any of the other forms of advocacy. And I just did want to bring up the legislative breakfast that Peter spoke about too. This is a great way for nonprofits to invite their legislators, well before maybe even the session started, in the fall or over the summer, or even during the session, just to have them come in and see what you do. And you don't have to have any kind of direct lobbying ask at that point. You're just really educating them about what you do. And then you're opening up that door for them to contact you later if there is a question on a policy that may impact them. And we do this a lot. We work with nonprofits to have a legislative breakfast, but again, there doesn't have to be a legislative ask, at least by that nonprofit. They're just really educating on what they do. So I just wanted to chime in on those two things.
Wonderful. In my past experience, people also put up bumper stickers or have T-shirts or other things just to raise awareness in their communities with other people who may then join them in advocating. So I would love to open this up to everybody. Thank you so much, Kate and Peter, for sharing that information.